When you get a minute, can you come by HR? The email read. I'm Alan Morse, 58 years old, and for the past 18 years, I worked as a senior project manager at Garnet Tech, a mid-sized software company in Atlanta. I walked into that beige HR office thinking it might be a quick update on my retirement plan. Instead, it felt like walking into my own funeral. Melissa from HR stood up with a bright, artificial smile. Alan, please, take a seat. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and avoidance. She slid a folder across the desk like it was a gift. We want to start by thanking you for your years of dedication. Truly, you've been such a stable figure here. I didn't respond. I just looked at the envelope. We've decided to restructure a few departments, she continued, each word slower than the last. And unfortunately, your position is being phased out. I raised an eyebrow. Phased out? It's nothing personal. We're realigning toward a more agile, youth-driven model. She said it like she was reading a menu. I'd managed over 70 successful projects, mentored half the staff on that floor, and negotiated the company's biggest contract last year. But now, I was being escorted out with a box and a branded pen. The worst part wasn't even the decision. It was how sterile and rehearsed it all felt, like they'd been waiting for the right quarter to clean house. As I walked down the corridor holding my things, I passed the break room and heard two of the younger associates laughing behind the half-closed door. He'll probably go teach night classes or something, one of them said. Or retire. I mean, how long did they expect a guy like that to keep up? A guy like that. I stood there for a moment, gripping the box to keep my hands from shaking. I didn't say anything. I didn't even turn around, but something shifted right there in that hallway. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, sharper, and I walked out, quietly. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I sat in my car for nearly an hour in the parking lot, watching people walk in and out of the building that had been my second home for almost 2 decades. No one noticed me. I was invisible now, just a ghost in a Honda. The voices from the break room still echoed in my head. A guy like that, what did that even mean? Too experienced, too methodical, too old. When I finally drove off, I didn't turn on the radio. I needed silence to process. That same evening as I entered my apartment, my wife Julia greeted me with a worried look. I hadn't told her what happened yet. "How was your day?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I smiled. "Eventful. We'll talk after dinner." We ate in near silence. I could feel her glancing at me between bites. I waited until we were done before I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet I hadn't looked at in years. It was a list of every team I'd mentored, project I'd led, intern I'd coached. "I got laid off today," I said calmly. She turned sharply. "What? Why? That doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense to them," I said, scrolling through names. "They wanted someone younger, cheaper, easier to mold." Her face tightened. "That's ridiculous. You were the backbone of that place." I nodded. "Which is why this list matters." There were dozens of names, people who had asked for my help, people who had needed my guidance, people who deep down knew who really kept things running. I started circling names. Adam, who I taught how to write proper budget proposals. Karina, who cried in my office the day before her first client pitch. Marcus, who struggled with data visualization until I showed him my system. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet. But I realized something that night, sitting at the kitchen table with a highlighter in one hand and my pride in the other. I had planted seeds everywhere in that company, and maybe it was time to water them. I spent the next morning at my desk, flipping through old emails, project folders, and calendars. For the first time in years, I wasn't working under pressure or deadlines. There was no status meeting to prepare for, no urgent client call. Just silence, and the occasional creak of my office chair. I opened a dusty notebook labeled Onboarding Notes and started jotting down names from memory. Adam Torres, Budget Workflows. Karina Wu, Public Speaking Prep. Marcus Bell, Dashboard Optimization. Leah Santos, Crisis Escalation Protocols. Benji Tran, Time Management and Client Handover Strategy. Each name came with a memory. Not grand gestures or headline moments, just late nights fixing broken spreadsheets, pep talks before presentations, diagrams drawn on whiteboards during lunch breaks. I realized then that my legacy at that company wasn't in reports or revenue, it was in people. Every one of those names had come to me when something wasn't working, and every time I'd helped them quietly, No credit, no recognition, just solutions. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Most of them were still there, people who now filled mid-level roles, some leading their own teams. I hesitated. Should I reach out? I didn't want to sound desperate. I wasn't asking for pity. So I sent short, simple messages. Hey, if you ever want a second pair of eyes on that Q3 planning, let me know. Just reviewed a report on client churn. Some insights if you're curious. No charge, just missed the puzzle. Within minutes, replies started coming in. Alan, are you okay? Wait, what happened? God, yes, that would help a lot. The tone wasn't polite or distant, it was warm, grateful. By the end of the day, I had 4 documents in my inbox from current employees, things they didn't trust their managers with, things they didn't know how to fix alone. I stayed up late reviewing each one, scribbling notes, crafting strategies. I wasn't on their payroll anymore, but I was still their leader, just off the record. The next few weeks slipped into a rhythm, one that felt strangely familiar. My alarm still rang at 6:30. I still brewed the same strong coffee. Only now, instead of commuting, I opened my laptop and waited for the quiet ping of new messages. And they came, more than I expected. Alan, do you have a moment to look at this projection model? Could you double-check this timeline? Something's off. I need help prepping for this client review. No one else has the time. I never said no. It started with 4 people, then 7, then nearly a dozen, all reaching out through back channels, personal emails, private LinkedIn messages, even encrypted Slack threads named things like Project Archive or Legacy Files. I kept my responses professional. No bitterness, no agenda. Just clean feedback, clear strategies, and quiet encouragement. But I took notes. I started tracking where the same issues popped up. Undertrained managers, rushed planning cycles, poor communication from above. I began to see a pattern, a slow unraveling of the infrastructure I'd helped build. The more I fixed, the more broken things I uncovered. Karina sent me a deck for a pitch to a potential $1 million client. The structure was wrong, the visuals cluttered. I asked who was reviewing it. Nick, she replied. He told me to just Google it. Nick was one of the guys laughing in the break room. I rebuilt her deck in 2 nights. The client signed within the week. Adam needed help justifying a budget expansion. I showed him how to structure a comparative analysis using past quarters. His proposal was approved with 0 edits. No one above them seemed to notice that their work had suddenly improved, but they noticed. They knew. And every time they succeeded, my phone lit up with thank you messages, praise, and, most telling, relief. I wasn't plotting a comeback, not yet, but I was watching, listening, gathering. And for the first time since I walked out of that building with a box in my arms, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I wasn't the only one who noticed the cracks forming. In mid-April, a key project, codenamed Nimbus, missed its delivery deadline by 3 weeks. The announcement went out via a terse company-wide email, unexpected delays due to resource reallocation. I knew what that meant. They'd put unprepared managers in charge, chasing optics instead of execution. Karina messaged me the next day. They blamed Marcus in front of the entire team, said he didn't communicate milestones properly. I called Marcus that night. He sounded wrecked. I walked him through a post-mortem format I used for years. We found 3 key errors, none of them his, all tied back to a rushed integration plan signed off by Nick. Same Nick, the one who once asked me if Gantt charts were still a thing. The chaos wasn't explosive. It was quiet, invisible to anyone not looking closely. Client feedback started to dip. Internal satisfaction surveys plummeted. Deadlines became soft targets rather than expectations. Meanwhile, people kept coming to me behind the scenes. I was fixing decks, auditing project plans, even coaching a junior developer through a technical interview for a promotion. None of it showed on any report. None of it passed through HR. And yet slowly the old structure, my structure, was holding things together like invisible scaffolding. One night Adam called me. He sounded nervous. Alan, I think you should know. During the last leadership call, they brought up how weird it is that performance hasn't completely collapsed. One of them said, and I quote, "Maybe Alan left a bigger footprint than we thought." I didn't respond. I just nodded to myself. They hadn't figured it out yet. They didn't know why the walls hadn't crumbled, but my people did. And they were starting to look to me, not just for help, but for direction. Quietly, respectfully, Not a rebellion. Not yet. But I could feel it. The center was slipping, and the only reason it hadn't fallen apart entirely was me. It was a Wednesday morning when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code wasn't. Alan, this is David Calloway. The name took me a second. Then it clicked. Regional Director. Higher up than anyone I'd worked with directly. I'd met him once at a conference in Dallas 5 years ago. Polished guy. Big picture type. I was wondering if you had time to meet for coffee this week. In private. I paused. Sure. Tomorrow work? He chose a quiet spot. An upscale cafe across town. The kind with Edison bulbs and wood-paneled walls. He was already seated when I arrived. Suit sharp. Eyes tired. Appreciate you coming, he said, shaking my hand. I won't waste your time. He leaned in, voice low. I've been hearing your name a lot. Not officially, of course, but through the grapevine. Staff whispering. Clients mentioning whoever helped them behind the curtain. And I know you haven't been on payroll. I didn't say anything, just sipped my coffee. He continued. I've seen the metrics. Something's holding that floor together. It's not the leadership team. Then he slid a folder across the table, much like Melissa had weeks ago. Only this time the contents weren't a termination. It was a proposal. Consulting contract, flexible hours, no reporting structure. You come in, diagnose what's wrong, recommend who stays and who doesn't. We follow your lead. I looked through the papers. The offer was generous, more than I'd earned before, and it came with one clause I hadn't expected. Autonomy. You call the shots. I closed the folder slowly. This comes from the top, I asked. He nodded. The board knows the numbers. They also know when something's being held up by one man. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about principle, dignity, proof. They thought they could throw me out like outdated hardware. And now? Now they were asking me to rebuild the system they broke. On my terms. The following Monday, I walked back into Garnett Tech. No badge, no assigned desk, just a visitor lanyard and the weight of silent stares. People noticed. Not the executives. They stayed in their glass offices pretending not to see. But the floor-level staff? They watched me like someone had returned from the dead. My first meeting was in Conference Room C. I knew it well, used to lead weekly scrums there. This time I sat at the head of the table, contract in hand, waiting for the team leads to arrive. 7 people walked in. 4 of them I'd trained myself. 2 barely made eye contact. 1, Nick, walked in late and made a joke under his breath. I didn't respond. I laid out a simple plan. Performance review of all ongoing projects, process audits, team assessments. No blame, no panic, just clarity. I didn't need authority. I had credibility, and it spoke louder than any title. By the second week, I was already rewriting workflows. I noticed how departments duplicated tasks, how approvals lagged, how decisions were delayed because no one wanted to take ownership. I started delegating to the ones who had come to me quietly over the past month. Karina, Adam, Leah. I elevated them without changing their titles, let them run with solutions they already understood better than their managers. Nick tried to push back in a meeting. I think this is overcomplicating things, he said, flipping through my notes. I smiled. Then explain why Nimbus collapsed. I read your implementation timeline. He froze. Silence. No one came to his defense. Later that day I saw him in the hallway. He looked away. For the first time people started bringing their questions to me openly. No more encrypted chats. No more whispers. I wasn't just fixing problems. I was building something new. Not a rebellion, not revenge. A quiet, measured course correction. They called it consulting. But everyone on that floor knew the truth. I was leading again. And this time, I didn't need a title to do it. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. I heard them in the cafeteria on a Thursday afternoon, 2 tables away, where 3 middle managers sat poking at their quinoa bowls. Did you see the new org chart draft? One muttered. He's not even technically on staff, another said, but everyone's treating him like he's running the place. The third just shook his head. They're scared. Because he is. I didn't react, just kept sipping my tea, flipping through a performance log on my tablet. It didn't bother me. They weren't wrong, but the tone had changed. What used to be mocking was now careful. What used to be dismissive was now uncertain. And in the middle of all that tension, I stayed exactly the same. I didn't yell, didn't correct, Didn't confront. I just worked. Karina stopped by my table later that day. Do you mind reviewing this new process map before I send it to the COO? I nodded. Of course. She looked over her shoulder. You know they're terrified of you, right? I raised an eyebrow. They don't know what you're planning. You don't say much, just move pieces. That made me smile. By the end of the week, 3 more staffers approached me for guidance, people who never even spoke to me when I was full-time. One of them, a team lead named Jordan, said something I didn't expect. I wish you'd been in charge from the start. None of this would have happened. It wasn't flattery. It was fatigue, exhaustion from years of being led by people who didn't listen. I gave him a nod and a quiet, thanks. At home that night, I told Julia how odd it felt to be both invisible and indispensable. She just smiled. That's what real power looks like. She was right. They'd underestimated me because I didn't shout. But now, the ones who used to ignore me paused when I passed. They asked questions more carefully. They watched my reactions the way people watch the sky before a storm. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't have to. It took me 3 days to write the report, not because I didn't know what to say. Every issue, every oversight, every shortcut taken by leadership was already logged in my notes. What took time was choosing the tone. It had to be precise, professional, bulletproof. I wasn't writing out of anger. I was documenting a system failure, one that began the moment leadership prioritized flashover foundation, image over integrity. The report was 43 pages long. It included project timelines, budget discrepancies, communication logs, and anonymized quotes from over a dozen employees. Each section ended with a simple conclusion: leadership negligence. The final pages listed names: Melissa from HR, who executed layoffs without understanding team value; Nick, who approved faulty plans, mismanaged teams, and alienated talent; 2 other directors, silent enablers who watched it happen and did nothing. At the top of the email, I addressed it to the CEO and copied the board of directors. Subject: internal assessment, operational risks and recommendations. No drama, no accusation, just facts and solutions. I hit send. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was David Calloway again. They read it, he said. All of it. And there's going to be a restructuring, he said carefully. Melissa's out. Nick too. The others will be reviewed over the quarter. The board wants to meet with you directly next week. I didn't celebrate, I just exhaled. That afternoon, the office buzzed like a kicked beehive. Rumors flew, doors closed, meetings were held behind frosted glass. People glanced at me in the hallway, some with curiosity, others with quiet gratitude. Karina passed me a note as I reviewed a rollout plan. It read, "Finally." Someone said it out loud. I folded it and slipped it into my notebook. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't threatened. I had just written the truth down and let it speak louder than any confrontation ever could. And the truth, it had consequences. 2 weeks later, I signed a new contract, not with Garnett Tech, with the parent company, Garnett Group International. They'd created a new internal consultancy division to oversee long-term organizational health across all subsidiaries. They asked me to lead it. 3 days a week, fully remote. Total control over team structure, project selection and executive reporting lines. No corporate politics, no meaningless titles, just purpose. When I told Julia, she smiled without surprise. They finally figured it out. I didn't go back to my old desk. Someone else sat there now. I didn't need to reclaim a chair to prove anything. Instead, I started mentoring again. Not just individuals this time, but entire systems. I trained directors on accountability, rebuilt frameworks for employee retention, and overhauled onboarding protocols. People listened. They didn't ask my age. They asked my opinion. On Fridays, I picked up my grandkids from school. We stopped for ice cream, rode bikes, watched cartoons. They didn't know what a consultant was. To them, I was just grandpa, and that was enough. Every now and then, someone from Garnett Tech reached out, someone who once avoided me in meetings or brushed off my experience. They asked for advice, a second chance, a clean start. I helped them, not out of spite, but because they were finally willing to learn. There was no revenge, no big speech, no dramatic reveal, just quiet correction, clear consequence. One afternoon, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Just 5 words in clean handwriting. We should have listened. Thank you. I pinned it above my desk. That was the end of it. They thought they could erase me, that I was too slow, too old, too done. But they were wrong. I didn't get even. I got essential.